Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere quiet. Too quiet, actually. It's just before dawn in a fog-choked churchyard, and the frost still clings to every crooked headstone, like the grave itself doesn't want to let go. There are no birds, no bells, no bustle. Just the sound of a single spade biting into half-frozen ground. That's your job. You dig. You probably won't survive this if you came expecting romance, or meaning, or even conversation. The 18th century gravedigger isn't honored. He's tolerated, barely. Your presence is a necessary discomfort, a walking reminder that everyone ends up underfoot eventually. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. The dead won't respond, but I promise I will. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with cold. You wake while it's still dark, before the cock crows, before the church bell rings, before the baker opens his shutters. You sit up slowly on a straw mattress that smells like mold and old shoes. The air in your small stone hut is so cold it feels solid. You keep your clothes on overnight now, saves time and frostbite. You swing your feet into your boots. They're stiff with yesterday's grave mud. You don't bother to clean them. You grab your shovel, well worn with a handle, smooth from years of quiet service, and head out the crooked door. The churchyard is already waiting. It's not large. Maybe 20 headstones in decent shape. Another 30 cracked and sinking like forgotten teeth. The rest are wooden crosses, simple sticks, or nothing at all. Just lumps in the ground that only you remember. Your first task, clear the night's frost from the grave you didn't finish yesterday. It's shallow, still half dug, but enough to trap the morning cold like a basin. You spit into your hands, rub them together, and begin. The sound of your shovel breaking crusted soil is the only music you get. Every scoop matters. The soil is thick with clay, here gray and clumpy. You've learned how to cut it clean, how to find the rhythm between lift and toss. You make tidy piles. You always make tidy piles. No one notices, but you do. Historians still argue whether gravediggers were part of the church's payroll or just paid in leftover bread and bad attitude. You do get coin, barely. More often a nod from the priest and half a loaf from a widow who didn't want to be seen bringing it. The hole deepens. The sun rises, reluctantly staining the mist, a sickly gold. You wipe sweat from your brow even though the air is still freezing. A dog wanders past. It pauses, sniffs, moves on. You dig. There's no glamour in this, no drama, just muscle and repetition. Your shoulders ache like they've been molded into the shape of the work itself. Eventually, you hit stone. You curse softly. Old bones, unmarked. Again. You always find them. You pause, kneel, Briskly, respectfully, you scoop the bones to one side. Femur, skullcap, one molar. You whisper, "Pardon me," out of habit, not belief. Then you keep digging. The villagers don't speak to you, if they can help it, not out of cruelty, but discomfort. You remind them of endings, of the final bed. You're not evil, you're just inconvenient. Kids throw stones sometimes. Teens whisper stories about how you sleep in coffins or talk to the dead. You don't correct them. You let them wonder. It's the only mystery they've got. You finish the grave, mid-morning, 6 feet, proper, clean walls. You place a board over the top and mark the edge with 2 stones so no one stumbles in. It's for a child this time, 7 years old, fever, no ceremony yet. That comes tomorrow. You eat bread by the wall, hard crust, no butter, no tea. Just enough to keep your jaw moving and your hands from shaking. You use the time to check the rows. You know them all. Who lies where? Who came with a priest? Who didn't? Which ones hold whole coffins, and which ones you had to fill with rocks because the family couldn't afford the pine. You've buried babies, strangers, soldiers, widows. A dancing bear once back when the traveling circus came through and something went wrong with the chains. You remember them all, not names, just shapes, sounds, the weight of the soil that day. Quirky fact. In 18th century Europe, some churchyards practiced layered burials, stacking bodies in tiers. When space ran out, you dug straight down, cleared the bottom, and made room again. You're not supposed to say that part aloud. It unsettles people. You glance at your second shovel, the newer one, the one you only use when someone important dies. It's polished, barely worn. You resent it, because it means everyone else gets the old one. You rise, stretch your back, and go to the shed. Time to sharpen the blade. You work it on the stone slowly, carefully. This shovel is your closest friend. It's always there. When the town forgets you, when the priest mumbles too fast to remember the name, when the weeping stops, the shovel remembers. You hang it on the hook, wipe your hands, and check the list the priest left under your door. A single name scribbled with minimal care. Tomorrow's burial. The child. No mention of siblings. No mention of coffin dimensions. Just initials and a time. You fold it once. Place it in your pocket. You'll be there. You always are. That's the work. You dig before anyone arrives. You lower the box. You stand still as prayers are mumbled. You fill the hole while the rest of the village walks away. And then you move on to the next one. Because the earth doesn't pause. And neither do you. The graveyard never fasts. It only eats slower some weeks. And this week, it's starving. You've dug 3 graves in 4 days. 2 old men, both claimed by coughs that turned wet and pink. 1 midwife drowned in a river on her way home from a birth. All locals. All known to you by the way they tipped their hats or didn't. This morning the air is wet with mist again, and the ground sucks at your boots like it wants to keep them. You pull your shovel from the wall with more reluctance than you'd ever show anyone watching. There's another name under your door, another grave to dig. It never feels like too much. Not exactly. But it also never feels like enough time to rest. You can never quite catch your breath. Just one more body. One more hole. You work in rhythm now. You know the soil types by feel. You know where the roots cluster. You know how to swing the pickaxe just enough to break them without bruising the wood of your shovel handle. You know how the weight of wet dirt doubles after rain and how the clods fall differently depending on what died last in the soil beneath. You hum to yourself today, not a tune anyone would recognize, just a low murmur to fill the space between the thuds of iron and the groan of your back. You don't talk to anyone while you work. That would require someone to be there. You don't mind, though. You get more done this way. Today's burial is scheduled for just past noon, which means the priest will arrive around 1 and the family at 1:15 if they come at all. Sometimes there's only a body and a prayer spoken so fast it could be a sneeze. Sometimes you wonder if the dead notice the difference. You measure the depth with your bootlace. The lace is tied around a stick that once held a candle at someone else's burial. The irony doesn't bother you. In fact, it feels fitting. This grave is for a woman you never met. You know her age, 42, and her cause complications after childbirth. The baby survived. That's rare. You pause halfway down the hole and sip water from a cracked tin mug. It tastes like rust and river clay. You still finish it. You lean back and look up at the sky. Clouds low and slow. You wonder briefly if it will rain during the burial. It has before. No one likes it, but the dead don't seem to mind. Historians still argue whether 18th century gravediggers were considered part of the community or only tolerated as tools. Some local councils recorded them as vital tradesmen. Others simply noted the expense and left it at that. You've been both valued during outbreaks, ignored during peace. You don't take it personally anymore. By the time you finish digging, your arms are trembling slightly. You don't stop to rest. You place boards across the hole, pat the soil flat around the edges, and smooth your shirt. The cleaner one, the one without any fresh mud on the front. The priest arrives late as expected. He nods at you once, and you nod back. He pretends you don't exist after that. The family comes with 2 others, friends, maybe, or neighbors. No one speaks much. No one cries loudly. It's one of those burials where sorrow feels too heavy for words. You've seen it before. A stillness in the air, like grief, has sucked the breath out of the world. You lower the coffin. You do it carefully. You always do. It's lighter than it should be. You know why. You try not to think about it. The priest mumbles. The guests shuffle. The child, just a bundle in an older woman's arms, makes no sound. You wait until the last guest leaves before picking up the shovel again. Filling a grave is harder than digging one, not because of the weight, but because it means the job is done. Because once the hole is full, the person is officially gone. You take your time, one scoop at a time, evenly, gently. You hear the wind shift. You smell the wetness of coming rain. You finish just before it starts to drizzle. A polite rain, not yet angry, just enough to settle the dirt and quiet the air. You stand over the new grave now, topped with nothing but soil and a single rock. You don't always place markers. Some families bring their own. Some never come back. But you remember. You know where she is. You mark it down later in your private book. Not the official log that stays with the priest. Your book is different. Hand-drawn with little details. No one asked you to record AF, age 42, fourth grave, in second row. Light wood child, survived. You sketch a small flower beside it. Not because you're sentimental, just because it feels honest. You close the book, wrap it in oilcloth, and place it back under the floorboard near your cot. That night you eat slowly. Salted fish, hard bread. Water you boiled yourself. You sit in silence. The graveyard outside is quiet. No animals. No sounds. Just the weight of new earth over old secrets. You sleep early. In your dreams, the ground breathes. You know the weight of every tool by feel. The shovel, the pickaxe, the tamping bar, each one has its own rhythm, its own balance. You use them like a carpenter uses a chisel, or a surgeon uses a scalpel, carefully, methodically, without fanfare. This is your craft. You begin the day sharpening edges, not for speed, for safety. A dull blade skips wounds. A sharp one answers you. Clean cuts mean cleaner graves, which means fewer surprises. You lay your tools out like a soldier might prepare arms. Shovel first blade curved from years of lifting what no one else will. Pickaxe next blunted slightly, but still capable of breaking rock or frozen clay. Then, your tamping bar for compressing the soil back into place after the box is lowered. A bucket of lime. A small saw for roots. 2 lengths of rope fraying, but still strong enough to hold a casket's weight. A mallet and chisel, mostly for when stones need moving or lids need loosening. 1 lantern, and a small folding knife you've had since your 3rd winter in this job. Altogether, it's a collection of quiet violence. You pack them in a wheelbarrow and begin your day's work. Today's grave is on the far end near the trees. You hate this patch. The ground here is stubborn, the roots thick, the slope uneven. Rain pools in strange places. You've lost a boot to this mud before. You still have dreams about it. You mark the spot. You set the boards. You begin. The first few inches are easy, soft, deceptive. But then the old roots start. The earth fights you. You fight back. You don't win. You just keep digging until the ground gives up. There's no audience. Just the wind through branches. A crow somewhere overhead. You find your pace, 6 inches every 15 minutes. Stop for water. Shake out your wrists. Keep going. Midway through, you hit rock. Not large, but annoying. You wedge the pick beneath it, shift your weight, and lever it free. It rolls with a thud, dislodging a chunk of clay the size of a loaf. Underneath more bone, always bone. An ulna this time, clean, old, weathered to ivory. You hold it for a moment, then place it gently beside the grave. You'll rebury it later, carefully. Even the forgotten deserve rest. Historians still debate the extent to which gravediggers were trained in any anatomical knowledge during the 18th century. Most weren't, but you know the bones. You've touched them, cleaned them, sometimes spoken to them. Not out loud, not anymore, but you used to, especially in the early years. You reached the right depth by mid-afternoon. You smooth the walls, square the corners. You place the boards back over the opening and wipe the sweat from your eyes. There's a funeral tomorrow. For now, the whole can wait. You return your tools to the shed, each in its place. The knife on the wall, the shovel against the door, the saw wiped clean and wrapped in cloth. Everything must be ready, because you might need to dig again at night, and if that happens, the tools must not hesitate. Quirky fact: some grave diggers in the 18th century developed their own sharpening rituals, partly habit, partly superstition. You know one who swore by sharpening his spade under a full moon. Another only used river stones taken from burials of peaceful deaths. You don't do any of that, but you do check your edges before every dig. You know what dull tools cost. You eat supper next to your tool shed tonight. The weather is too fine to waste indoors. The moon is waxing. The sky is clear, and the wind smells like clean dirt. You finish your bread slowly, every bite followed by a sip of water. You chew with purpose. This is your only luxury time. You stay out longer than usual. The graveyard glows in the pale moonlight. The stones cast long shadows. The trees creak like they're muttering names you've buried. You know every corner of this place, not because you memorized it, but because you made it. You tilt your head back, stare at the stars. The world is so wide, but yours is a rectangle 6 feet deep, 5 feet long, 2.5 feet across. You walk the rows, nodding silently to each grave. Some have names, others don't. Some have flowers. One has a bottle cap tucked beneath a stone. You don't ask. You just keep walking. At the farthest corner, you stop. There's a grave there that hasn't been dug yet, because it's yours. You chose the spot years ago, marked it with a small flat rock. You dig it an inch deeper each year, just in case. Not out of morbid humor, just readiness. You rest your hand on the stone and whisper, "Not yet." Then you turn back. The flame in your lantern flickers. You follow it home. You sleep within earshot of the graves. Not because you want to, because there's nowhere else to go. Your room is little more than a lean-to stone on 3 sides wood on the 4th, with a roof that leaks when the rain comes from the east. The bed is straw on slats. The heat is your own breath. The smell is earth, always earth, threaded with mildew and wax from the candle that never burns, long enough. You don't mind, though, it's quiet, and quiet is rare. You wake to the church bell. 2 rings, a death notice. No name, no details, just sound. It echoes through the village, across the fields, and into your ribs. You swing your legs off the bed and reach for your boots, still wet, still cold. The shovel waits. You check the note under your door. 1 word, boy, no age, no name, just that, and a time. You sigh. You've buried too many boys. You stretch your arms. The joints crack like dried twigs. Your back stiffens. You breathe through it. Outside, the sky is slate. Rain threatens, but doesn't fall. You head toward the graveyard, passing the church which stares at you, with all its windows like judgmental eyes. The priest nods. That's all. You nod back. Anything more would break the spell. You pass the bakery, smell bread. Keep walking. You're not welcome there. Not because you've done wrong, but because no one wants to be reminded while biting into a warm roll that they'll one day rot. Even your coins come back marked. People hold them differently, like they carry disease or sadness. You've seen a child wipe her hand after accidentally touching you. You felt that for days. Historians still argue whether gravediggers were seen as liminal figures between life and death, or just unfortunate laborers. Some records lump you in with executioners and midwives, the bringers of endings and beginnings. But unlike them, you stay invisible. You reach your tool shed and check the spade's edge again. You sharpen it, even though you did yesterday. Ritual more than need. Today's grave is near the south wall, a new section, less crowded. You pace out the spot, mark the edges, begin. You don't think about the boy while digging. You can't. Not yet. The earth is softer today, still wet from rain 3 nights ago. Easier to lift. You dig efficiently. Not fast. Speed leads to mistakes, and you've made them before. Once years ago, you misjudged a corner. A coffin broke. You had to fix it while a widow wept. You don't make that mistake again. As you dig, the village moves on without you. Horses clop. Children scream. Doors slam. You keep digging. You hear footsteps. Turn. It's the boy's father. Alone. He carries the small box himself. No cart, no priest, no mourners. You nod. He doesn't return it. He doesn't need to. You help lower the box. It's light. Too light. You speak no words. Neither does he. You cover it slowly. No ceremony. Just soil, and the sound of a man trying not to break. When he leaves, you mark the grave with a stone and a scrap of wood. No name. Just a line carved with your knife. You add him to your book later. Unknown boy, south wall, buried without witness. Father stayed. You underline that last part, because that matters. You eat late today, just cheese and crust. The cheese is hard, the crust is harder. Your hands are stained from the grave and you don't bother washing them. The smell doesn't go away anyway. Quirky fact: some 18th century villages believed gravediggers absorbed the sins of the buried, that each spadeful of soil made you heavier, darker, closer to the other side. You don't believe that, but some days your shoulders feel like they're carrying more than your own bones. The evening is quiet. The graveyard still. You make rounds before bed, check every new grave, press down soft earth, whisper names if you know them. Rest well, you say once out loud. You're not sure why. Maybe for them, maybe for you. Your room is colder tonight. You wrap your coat around your legs. You stare at the ceiling. Sleep doesn't come quickly. When it does, you dream of soil, turned and waiting. The bodies don't always wait their turn. You get word mid-morning cart accident on the old Roman road. A merchant's wife crushed beneath an overturned wheel. She died before the priest arrived. The husband wants her buried before sundown. You don't argue. You just nod and set to work. The grave you were already halfway through for the baker's mother is now on hold. You cover it with a cloth and a stone and turn to start a fresh one just 10 feet away. You won't get back to the other grave until tomorrow, maybe longer. That's how the dead rearrange your plans. It's not rare. In fact, it happens more often than you'd like to admit. The living set the schedule. The dying ruin it. Your hands are still sore from yesterday's dig. The south section always takes something extra from you. But this new grave is in a slightly better patch, less root, more sand. You thank the ground aloud and begin. As you dig, your mind drifts to the unfinished grave, to the unfinished lunch, to the unfinished letters you never sent to your brother in the next town. You haven't spoken in years, not since he said, "You're better than this." You aren't, and that's fine. The work is steady. You strike a buried horseshoe, not uncommon near the road. You toss it into a pile without a second glance. By noon, you've reached depth, just in time for the cart to arrive. 2 men, a priest, and the merchant. The husband doesn't speak. He stands with arms crossed, face like a worn coin, flattened by grief and exposure. The coffin is dark wood, hastily hammered. The nails barely hold. They ask you to lower her. You do. She's heavier than expected. You can tell there's something else in the coffin. You've done this long enough to notice. Maybe a blanket. Maybe her favorite shawl. Maybe something that smells like home. You don't ask. You never ask. The priest mumbles his verses. The merchant throws in a single white flower, already drooping. Then, silence. Everyone leaves, except you. You stay to fill the grave. Shovel by shovel, the earth takes her. You flatten the top with the back of the spade, then press it gently with your boots. The ritual is not written, but you do it the same every time. Clean edges, flat surface, a stone at the head, a smaller one at the foot. When it rains, you'll check again to make sure it hasn't sunken. Historians still debate whether 18th century burials followed strict religious sequence during emergencies. Some churches insisted on last rites, while others turned a blind eye for convenience or fear of disease. In your village, the priest blesses the dirt if he's on time. If not, the grave does the work without him. You take the broken horseshoe and hang it on the inside wall of your shed. Not for luck, just because it was there. There's a rhythm to this life, but it's not predictable. Death comes in pairs, in threes, then nothing for days, then 4 in a row. You've learned not to plan beyond the next sunrise. You make a note in your book, merchant's wife, East Row, rushed burial, heavy coffin, storm coming. You stare at the last words, storm coming. You hadn't thought of that until now. You look up, clouds thick and dark rolling low across the fields. The wind has shifted. You can smell rain in the roots of the grass. You hurry back to the half-dug grave. You'll need to cover it better. A collapsed wall means more work, more danger. The last time it happened, you spent 3 days with a bruised hip and a broken shovel. You add more boards, pile heavier stones, cross yourself, even though belief has long since dried up in your chest. Quirky fact: in rural Europe, unfinished graves were often blamed for bad luck. Some thought they invited death to strike again before the hole was filled. You've seen that happen more than once, and though you don't believe in curses, you never leave a grave exposed overnight if you can help it. The rain begins after dark, heavy, relentless, loud. It drums against the roof like 1,000 feet running. You listen. Each beat is a reminder that your work might have just washed away. But you don't rise. Not yet. You've done what you could. Tomorrow you'll check. You always do. For now you lie still. Let the rain speak. Let the ground decide. You're not welcome at the altar. You stand in the back when you attend at all, far from the candles, the hymns, and the watchful gaze of the priest. You don't kneel. You don't take the wafer. You don't even pretend to sing, because everyone knows you've touched too many corpses to be clean. This morning, you're early to the churchyard again. Not because you're devout, but because the priest's assistant left a note on your door. Double burial. Be ready. You're always ready. But you still hate double burials. 2 sisters this time. Diphtheria. Aged 6 and 8. You dig the grave wider, not deeper that risks collapse. You dig it longer instead. A shared resting space, as if they didn't suffer enough closeness in their final moments. You pull up a chunk of tree root and toss it aside. It lands with a wet thunk and spills a nest of beetles. You let them be. They'll be back soon enough. The graveyard is silent as usual, except today the silence feels heavier. You feel watched. You glance toward the church. The door creaks open. The priest steps out, robes fluttering, expression unreadable. He walks toward you, not quickly, not warmly, but directly. You stop digging and straighten your back. He doesn't greet you. He just peers into the hole. Is it deep enough? He asks. You nod. Yes, Father. He doesn't say thank you. He just murmurs, it'll be over quickly, and walks away. Historians still argue whether parish priests respected or resented their gravediggers. Some letters describe gravediggers as unholy men of practical necessity. Others hint at quiet bonds formed during plagues when only two people remained willing to stand near the dead. You and your priest, you're neither friends nor enemies. You're necessary to each other, that's all. The carts arrive just before noon. 2 coffins, small, pale, barely longer than crates. The mother is not present. Word is, she collapsed. The father comes alone and he carries both coffins with the help of the blacksmith. You lower the first, then the second. There's no room for flowers. The priest says his words. Even he sounds tired. When they're gone, you fill the grave. Softly, scoop by scoop. You take care not to jar the boxes. You smooth the top, mark it with a line of 4 stones, 2 for each head, 2 for each foot. You whisper the girls' names, learned from the burial sheet. Annette, Elise. Then you sit on the edge of the grave and drink water from your tin. The earth smells raw. The sun hides behind clouds, unsure if it should show its face today. You make a note in your book, Annette and Elise, sisters, West Line Grave 3, quietest burial yet. You underline that last part twice. Afterward, you clean your shovel. You always do. Quirky fact. In some regions of Europe, a dirty shovel left overnight near a fresh grave was thought to invite the dead back out. Superstition mostly. But the one time you forgot. You had a dream of a little hand reaching for your ankle. You never forgot again. Later that day, you pass the priest in the village square. He doesn't meet your eyes. You nod anyway. He nods back, barely. And that's your entire relationship. 2 nods and a shared grave. You return to your shed, rehang your tools, scrub the blade, oil the hinges. You sit beside your door and watch the sun dip below the hills. The graveyard stretches out before you, stones sharp against the sky. You know them all. Who lies beneath? Who came quietly? Who came screaming? You've buried them all. But the church, it only blesses the ground once. Never the man who dug it. There's a smell that clings to you no matter how hard you scrub. It's not just soil, not just sweat, or old wood, or rusted metal. It's something deeper, a kind of damp permanence, the smell of turned earth that once held breath. You've tried soap, boiled your clothes, stood naked under rain. It doesn't leave. People notice it. They wrinkle their noses. They shift away when you enter. They don't say anything, not directly, but their silence is loud. Today the tavern refuses you. You stand just inside the doorway, coins in hand, and the innkeeper looks up from his ledger and says, without looking at you, "We're full." You glance around. Half the tables are empty. You nod once and step back outside. You don't argue. You don't beg. You've learned to eat alone. You return to your corner of the yard, a log you've sat on so many times it's shaped like your spine. Bread. Salt. One apple. Soft on one side. The world continues without you, and you continue without it. This evening a boy follows you. 12, maybe 13. Thin legs, scuffed boots. He trails behind you, from the village to the graveyard. Never speaking, you don't stop him. You reach your shed, unlock the door, begin checking tools. He stands just outside the gate, watching. You turn and nod. Want to see you ask. He nods. You hand him a shovel, small worn one you no longer use for real work. You walk to an empty patch of soil, mark out a shallow square. He digs. Not well, but with effort. You say nothing, just watch. After a while he asks, "Does it bother you?" You blink. What? The bodies. You stare past him toward the far wall of the yard, where the newest graves still bear footprints. You say, "Only the forgotten ones." Historians still argue whether grave digging was passed down through families. Some records suggest sons followed fathers. Others claim it was a role taken by those with no other path. You never knew your own father's trade. He died when you were 5, buried by a stranger. That's what started it all, maybe. The boy finishes his hole, barely a foot deep. He wipes his brow and looks to you for approval. You nod again. Good, you say. But next time, dig wider at the top. The earth will cave if you go straight down. He nods back, absorbing the knowledge like bread. You hand him a piece of jerky from your pocket. He chews. You both sit in silence. He doesn't ask to come again, but you know he will. That night you add a note to your book, apprentice uncertain, boy from village, curious hands, asked about the dead. Quirky fact. Some 18th century gravediggers took on orphans or outcasts to help with labor. Not officially, of course. But a second set of hands made a difference, especially during epidemics, especially when your own back gave out. You sharpen your good spade, oil the hinges on the gate, check the graves along the east wall for signs of sinking. Everything holds. For now, you light your lantern, carry it along your usual path. You count the graves, one by one. You never write this part down. This part is just for you. The wind moves through the grass like breath. A bird shrieks once, then goes quiet. You sit beside the grave of a man no one came for. No name, no stone, just dirt. You remember his hands, clean, worn, like yours. You whisper, "Still here." The lantern flickers. You head inside. The door closes behind you like a whisper. You don't sleep well. Dreams are crowded. Too many people you never met. All waiting. Rain doesn't fall in drops out here. It falls in slabs. Heavy enough to flatten a man's shoulders. Heavy enough to make graves weep. This morning the rain has already soaked through your roof. You wake to the sound of dripping, regular, like a clock that's decided time should move slower. The straw beneath you is damp. You don't bother checking your boots. You already know they're wet. You wrap your coat tighter, light your lantern, and step out into the morning. The sky is the color of pewter. The wind smells like iron. Today you're not digging. You're checking, because last night's rain was a loud one, the kind that shifts soil and tests the strength of your footings, the kind that makes yesterday's work feel like it never happened. You make your rounds, as always. First to the west row, the oldest section. The graves here are mostly stone-covered, solid, unyielding. You run your palm across the tops, checking for sunken centers, loose edges, soft spots. Then, to the east slope where the merchant's wife was buried just 4 days ago. Her grave has held, for now, but one to the right hasn't. You spot the sink immediately, a hollowed dip barely an inch deep, but enough to tell you the wood beneath is softening. Water does that, creeps in, swells the coffin, breaks the lid, collapses the air gap. You sigh and begin to dig again, not to open the grave, just to repack it. You remove the top layer of sod, add fresh soil, tamp it down, pack the corners. It takes time and strength and more than a little care. You do it all in silence, because even in repair, a grave should be treated like a secret. Historians still argue whether 18th century grave diggers were expected to perform long-term grave maintenance. Official records are vague. Parish accounts often show one fee per burial with no mention of future work. But you know better. If a grave collapses under rain and no one fixes it, the stench rises. And so do questions. You finish the repair just as the rain slows. You wipe your brow with a cloth that's already soaked through. You squint at the sky, half hoping for sun. You get mist instead. Your hands are wrinkled from the cold. You flex your fingers and head to the tool shed. You need to check the lime. Lime is your invisible tool. It doesn't dig, it doesn't lift, it doesn't fill, but it protects. A thin layer sprinkled into the grave before the coffin goes in, just enough to keep the rot slower, to keep the smell down, to convince the worms to wait. You top up your lime bag. Then you do something you don't do often. You sit, right there in the shed on the edge of a broken barrel. You listen to the sound of the wind through branches, to the echo of rain dripping from gravestones, to the hush of the earth trying to dry itself. You feel it all, the weight of wet clothes, the itch of soil between your fingers, the cold pressing behind your eyes. Quirky fact. Some gravediggers believed rain during a burial was a blessing. Heaven weeps for the dead, they'd say. Others believed it meant the soul hadn't settled. You believe neither, but you do notice that the worst rains come after the loneliest funerals. You glance at the boy's practice hole near the wall. It's now filled with rainwater, a small puddle reflecting the gray sky. You'll have to show him how to cover it next time, if there is a next time. You add a note to your book, repacked grave, east slope. No sign of collapse yet. water pooling in boys' test dig. You consider writing more, but your hands are tired. Instead, you step back outside and walk the rows once more. Everything's a little heavier today, even the air. You stop at the edge of the yard, near the stone you placed for yourself years ago. It hasn't sunk, not yet. You take off your cap, run a hand through your wet hair, and smile, barely. Not because you're glad, but because it's still holding. You return to the shed, hang your coat to dry, knowing it won't. You sit on the edge of your bed and press your palms together, not in prayer, just to feel something warm. That night the rain returns. You sleep anyway, because if the graves collapse, you'll fix them in the morning. Mud is a kind of insult, not the dry dirt that clings to your boots, not the soft loam that crumbles between your fingers. No, this is different. This is rain-soaked, soupy, sucking mud, the kind that grabs your heels and whispers, "You're not leaving." And it's everywhere today. You wake before dawn to the sound of wind, scratching the thatch above your head. When you open the shed door, the path to the graveyard is already a river of sludge. The grass squelches beneath your soles. The fog hangs thick, refusing to lift. You've been summoned. A tailor has died, 61 years old, no wife, no children. One brother who sent word at sunrise, burial by afternoon. You sigh, because the graves dug in mud are the worst. You load your tools. You set out toward the north edge of the yard, the driest patch you can find. It won't matter. The rain has already soaked 2 feet deep. You mark the space measure with your boots and begin. Each shovel of mud weighs twice what dry earth does. It doesn't fall. It flops. You can feel it in your spine. The first foot is manageable. The second is slower. By the third, your shovel begins to stick. The suction pulls against your efforts like something alive. You brace your foot on the blade. Lean with your whole body. Each scoop is a negotiation. By the fourth foot, the sides begin to sag. You stop, breathe, adjust, lay planks along the edge, because the last thing you need is the wall caving in on you. It's happened before. A gravedigger from 2 parishes over died that way, buried in his own unfinished work. They had to dig him out with his own tools. You move slower now, more careful, more calculating. Historians still debate whether 18th century graveyards used structural supports in rainy seasons. In wealthier cities, they did wooden frames, drainage ditches, even stone vaults. But out here, you use what you have. And what you have is instinct. You reach 5 feet, then stop. Not because you're done, but because the water has started to rise. At first, just a puddle, then a shimmer across the bottom. Then it starts to bubble. You curse under your breath and climb out. Sit on the edge of the grave and watch it fill. You can't bury a man in a pool, not unless you want to hear about it for months from the priest and years from the brother. You hike back to the shed and fetch the hand pump, old, rusty, unreliable, but it might work. You spend the next hour bailing. It doesn't work. The rain starts again, soft but steady. You pick another spot, higher ground, start over. Mud has ruined worse days. By the time the coffin arrives, late, of course, you're covered from knee to shoulder in wet earth. Your boots make noises when you walk that sound like curses in another language. The brother arrives on foot. No cart, just a rope-bound box slung between him and the village miller. They set it down without ceremony. No priest today. The rain, they said. You lower the coffin yourself. It slips once. You catch it, just barely. You fill the grave fast, not sloppily, but urgently. You don't want to be out here another minute. The earth slides. You pat it down. The mound is uneven, but stable. You place a stone. Nothing carved, just heavy enough to stay. You make a note in your book, Taylor Mud Burial. First grave abandoned, second held barely. Quirky fact. In some rural villages, bodies buried during heavy rain were believed to rise again, not as the undead, but as bad omens. He didn't want to stay, they'd say. You've seen coffins float. You've seen soil shift enough to reveal a finger. And you've seen a crowd cross themselves as if your graveyard were cursed. You clean your tools in the stream behind the shed. Scrape off the worst of the muck. The rest will dry and flake off eventually. You peel off your shirt. Hang it in the breeze. Stand there, bare-chested, letting the cold do its work. Your body aches. Your skin smells like copper and damp leaves. You sit down exhausted. Watch the fog creep in again like it never left. Your thoughts are slow now. Your fingers twitch. You lie back on the dirt, not quite asleep, not quite awake, and listen to the ground breathing beneath you. Children always find you. You don't seek them out. You walk the long way around the schoolhouse, avoid the midday crowds in the square, and keep your eyes lowered near the bakery, where they swarm with sticky fingers and skipping ropes. But they still find you. Today it's 2 girls and a boy, all under 10, all with shoes too big and voices too loud. They catch you while you're carrying a bundle of tools across the green heading toward a new plot by the church's outer wall. Are you the one who puts people in the ground? One of the girls asks. You don't stop walking, but she runs to keep up. Do they ever wake up? You pause. Only for a second. Then keep walking. The boy joins in, arms crossed like a priest. My uncle says the gravedigger talks to ghosts. You glance at him. He stares back like he dares you to confirm it. The third child, the quiet one, just walks beside you, looking at your boots. Finally, she asks softly, do they get scared down there? You stop. Because she asked it like she meant it. Like she wasn't trying to spook herself or impress her friends. She just wanted to know. You look down at the grave you're preparing. A fresh patch of dirt. No markers yet. Then you say, not after the first night. They go quiet after that. Children understand more than they should. Historians still argue whether children in the 18th century were exposed to death more directly than we are now. Burial records show how many siblings never made it past 5. And yet, somehow the questions children ask have barely changed in 200 years. The children don't follow you into the graveyard. They never do. There's something about the threshold, the open gate, the shift in air that stops their feet. You hear one of them whisper, "He lives with the dead," and they scatter. You're alone again. You set down your tools, start digging. The soil is dry today, but riddled with root. You cut through them methodically, one by one. As you dig, you remember being a child. Just once. You were 7. You watched the old gravedigger lower your neighbor into the ground. You remember how he never looked up, how his fingers were thick with earth, how he limped as he walked. You remember thinking, "I could do that." And now you do. You spend the rest of the morning deepening the grave. Occasionally, a villager passes outside the gate. They never come in. One stops and leans against the stone wall. A woman you vaguely recognize. Her husband died last winter. She doesn't speak, just watches. You nod. She doesn't return it. Quirky fact. In some regions of Europe, gravediggers weren't spoken to for weeks after major burials. The belief was that you carried death's shadow, that it might pass on through words, through eye contact, through shared bread. You've eaten alone for most of your life. When the grave is finished, you lay planks over the top. Protection, respect, preparation. You sit beside the head. Breathe deep. A sparrow lands nearby, stays, then flits off. That night you hear children outside your shed, not playing, just whispering. You don't get up. You've heard it before. Once they tied a bundle of herbs to your door. Warded off evil, they said. Another time, they left a daisy chain on your spade. You don't know if it was kindness or superstition. Maybe both. You lie back, close your eyes. Your hands ache. Your knees crack when you turn. You dream of children's laughter, echoing through graves like wind in hollow trees. It doesn't wake you, it never does. Night in the graveyard is louder than you'd expect. Not because of voices, those are rare, even in dreams. No, it's the wind. The wind knows every crack in every stone, every hollow between every grave. It moves through them like breath, whistling, moaning, sometimes even singing. You've stopped trying to muffle it. The more you fight it, the more it finds new ways to speak. Tonight you're awake, not from fear that left you years ago, but from the cold. It has crept into your bones, not sudden like winter, but slow, deliberate. You curl your fingers under your arms and shift beneath the blanket. The straw mattress rustles like dry grass. You close your eyes, but the wind keeps talking. You hear your name, not clearly, but clearly enough. You sit up, light your candle, pull your coat on over your nightshirt and step out barefoot into the dark. The fog is low. The moon is nothing more than a Suggestion. The lantern you carry cuts a weak arc across the stones. You follow the sound. Down the east path. Around the elm. Past the old well, and then you see it. A grave. Open. But not dug by you. Not sunken. Not collapsed. Just open. Like someone or something wanted out. You feel it before you think it. This wasn't there yesterday. You kneel at the edge. Look inside. It's empty. Not a bone, not a scrap of wood, just disturbed earth, clawed loose from within. You sit back on your heels. Blink once. Twice. You could scream. You don't. Because the truth is, you've seen this before. Not often, but enough. Historians still debate whether 18th century gravediggers documented disturbed graves. Parish records rarely mention them. Too scandalous, too superstitious. But your own private book has a page. Just one. Titled Returns. You open that page tonight. Add a line, East Path, Elm Shadow. No rain last night. Empty. You don't speculate. You don't accuse. You simply record. Because that's your job. People think gravediggers deal in death. But what you really manage is aftermath. You fill the hole before dawn, just in case someone sees it. You don't want questions. You don't want the priest. You don't want the boy to return and find it. The soil is looser than usual, as if it wants to stay unsettled. You tamp it down hard. When you're done, you stand there in the dark listening. The wind is quiet now, too quiet. You return to your shed. Wash your hands with the last of your rainwater. Light your candle again. Try to sleep. You dream of empty boxes, of tapping fingers beneath stone, of names you never wrote down. Quirky fact, in some 18th century villages, gravediggers were required to place heavy stones atop child graves, not just for animals, but to keep the soul still. You've always done it, even when no one asks. Morning comes, gray and early. You don't mention the event to anyone. No one would believe you anyway. And besides, you're not sure you want them to. Some things are better left buried, even if they don't stay that way. You weren't always a gravedigger. It's strange how rarely you remember that. The role is so complete, so all-consuming, that it rewrites your past with muddy hands. But this morning, something pulls you back. A smell bread baking. It floats from the village bakery and catches you mid-step on the way to the tool shed. And just like that, you're 17 again, standing behind a counter with flour on your sleeves, trying to impress a girl with a crooked smile and a hollow laugh. Her name was Marie. She hated bread. But she came anyway, every day for a week, until the coughing started, and the priest's candle passed beneath her window. You didn't bury her. You weren't the digger then, but you remember watching and thinking, that should have been me, not because you felt responsible, because you wanted the last word, the final kindness, the sealing of the soil. Historians still argue whether young men in 18th century Europe willingly chose grave digging as a profession or were cornered into it by circumstance. The truth like most truths, is probably both. You take out your book, the leather one, the small one you don't show anyone, the one with pages stained from thumbprints and tears and rain. You write, Marie, remembered by smell, missed by silence. Then you sharpen your spade. Today, you're digging for someone they called Old Thomas, though he wasn't especially old. Mid-40s, drank more than he worked, died quietly, and no one was surprised. No family at the burial. Just the priest, humming something tuneless. He doesn't say much today. He barely blesses the ground. You do your part with care anyway, even when no one's watching you. Smooth the corners. Pack the earth gently. Tuck the mound like a blanket. You think of Marie, how you never got to say goodbye, how now you say goodbye for strangers every day. The sky shifts around noon blue, creeping through gray like a sigh. You take your meal on the wall, boots dangling, looking out across the fields. There's movement at the far gate. The boy again, same one from before. But this time he's carrying something, a bundle wrapped in cloth. He walks the whole path without stopping. Comes to you, eyes wide but steady. It's my cat, he says. She died last night. You look at the bundle. Small, still, light. She was old, he adds. I didn't want her in the woods. You nod. Pick a spot, you say. He chooses the tree line, not in the graveyard, just near it. You dig a shallow hole. Let him lay her down himself. He doesn't cry, but when it's done, he stands there a long time. Then he says, "Do you think she'll be lonely?" You say no. Not here. He walks home without another word. You stay. Add a marker. Just a small stone, no name. But you'll remember, quirky fact, it was common for gravediggers to bury animals near, but never in the consecrated ground. Dogs, cats, even horses, given their own spaces, sometimes with tiny tokens or carved pebbles, never official, always remembered. Later, as you sweep out the shed, you find an old sketch pressed between two boards, a face you barely recognize now, Marie in charcoal. You must have done it years ago when her memory still had edges. You don't cry, but you place the drawing back where it was, like a secret. That night you dream of the bakery, of warm hands and cold windows, and of graves that bloom with wild flowers in the spring. Sometimes your hands shake, not from fear, not even from cold, just weariness. The kind that builds slowly day by day, grave by grave, until even holding a spoon feels like too much. You notice it this morning while trimming the grass around the east corner stones. Your shears slip twice. You pause, stare at your fingers, and feel the tremble ripple through them like a quiet rebellion. You sit on the stone edge. Try not to think about it. But of course you do. You're not young anymore. Your back reminds you every time you lean over a coffin. Your knees grumble every time you kneel to scrub moss from a name. And your hands forget what rest feels like. You flex them once, twice. They still work, and so will you. Today is repair day. No new burials, just tending, straightening stones, clearing ivy, recarving names softened by years and weather. You walk the rows slowly, with purpose. Each grave is a sentence. Some are still loud. Bold names, recent dates, polished stone. Others whisper. Worn letters, half-tilted markers, offerings faded by sun and wind. You carry chalk for the illegible ones. You crouch, shade a name, then recarve the faint grooves with a nail and care. Johannes, this one reads, born 1713, died. The last digit is gone. Just a scratch now. You make your best guess. Add the chalk back in. Historians still argue whether gravediggers were permitted to alter or restore stones. Technically, it was the mason's role. But in smaller parishes, you were the only one who remembered where the mason lived and when he died. You mark Johannes's spot with a ribbon of twine. You'll return later with a better chisel. As you move to the next, you find an odd thing, a shoe. Children's size, half-buried leather, cracked laces, gone. You pick it up. It's dry inside. Old. You turn it over. No name. Just a hint of stitching, a memory you can't place. You hold it for a while, then set it gently near a grave marked only LM. You don't know if it belonged there, but it looks right. Quirky fact, in parts of 18th century rural Europe, families left shoes or gloves near children's graves as talismans, tokens to help them walk safely into the next world. Some graves, if you dig carefully enough, still reveal them today. The wind picks up around midday. Your candle back in the shed blows out twice. You don't relight it. Instead, you eat your bread in silence. Stare out the window. Listen. The birds are louder now. They always are, before rain. You make one last sweep before dusk. Check the newest burials. No sinkholes. No surface disturbances. The open grave from last week remains sealed. You still walk past it a little faster than the others. At the far wall, you see someone has left a wreath. Fresh. Wildflowers, woven by hand, laid beside a name long forgotten by the rest of the village. You don't touch it, but you nod. Someone else remembers. That's rare. You return to your shed and rub salve into your fingers. They still tremble. You think about the boy again. If he came back, you might show him how to hold a chisel. Might teach him the soft tap that letters need. Might. But not tonight. Tonight you lie back. Feel the bones in your spine align with the straw. And listen to the wind trace your name across the eaves. You wake to frost. Not snow, not yet, but a white film coats the grass. The stones, the handle of your spade left resting against the shed wall. The morning air stings when you breathe. It smells like iron and wood smoke. You pull on your thickest coat, the one with the patched elbows and stiff sleeves. It used to belong to the man who trained you. He left it behind when he died, just folded neatly at the foot of his cot, like he knew you'd need it. You did. You still do. You check the earth first. Hard, not frozen solid, but well on its way. You know what that means. It's almost time to start the winter burials, above ground in stone crypts or wooden vaults, to wait until the thaw. You hate those most of all. There's something unnatural about not finishing the job, about tucking someone in without sealing the earth over them. But that's how it's always been. You make a list in your head of what needs preparing: the vault, hinges, the stone lids, the drainage trench. Then you see it. A bird, dead, not decayed, fresh, perfect, lying right in front of your shed door, its wings splayed as if mid-flight, its eyes still glassy. You crouch beside it. There's no blood, no signs of struggle, just stillness. Historians still argue whether omens were taken seriously in 18th century village life. Clergy condemned superstition, but villagers whispered their meanings anyway. Birds found dead at doorsteps were signs of endings, of warnings, of transitions. You pick it up gently, dig a tiny grave near the wall, use your smallest spade. You don't say a prayer, but you do whisper, "Fly farther next time." The ground gives grudgingly. You mark it with a single white stone. Then you return to the work of the living. There's an old family tomb that needs clearing. The family left years ago, moved to the city or to the Americas, or maybe just decided they didn't care anymore. But the tomb remains choked with ivy, door rusted shut. You carry a crowbar, not for the first time. It takes effort. The metal groans. One hinge snaps. Inside, dry air, stale as old cloth. Wooden boxes, stacked too deep. Some are split. One is missing its lid entirely. You don't look too closely. You just clear the ivy, remove the leaves, oil the hinges, add new nails where the wood gives way. Quirky fact, many 18th century tombs weren't sealed permanently. Families added members across decades. Some even stored the deceased temporarily until the church could find space in the yard. It's why every gravedigger keeps a hammer, a crowbar, and a sense of humor. You find a child's drawing on the wall. Charcoal stick figures, one tall, one small. A cross above them. You don't touch it. You just nod. That night the wind changes. It blows from the east, sharp, brittle. You feel it in your joints. You light a fire, the first in months. Its crackle fills the silence. You sit by it, hands outstretched, eyes closed. You think of the bird, of the frost, of how even stone must rest eventually. Outside the graveyard sleeps. You can feel it, breathe. Coin doesn't clink the way it used to. Maybe your ears are dulling, or maybe the coins are thinner now. Either way, when the priest slides your week's pay across the table at the back of the chapel, it barely makes a sound. 3 copper pieces. You don't count them until later, because you already know they'll be short. They always are. Parish budgets are tight, the priest says, not unkindly. And you've no family to feed after all, as if that makes a difference. You nod. Not because you agree, but because arguing never helps. You pocket the coins, feel their weight or lack of it, and step outside into a wind that doesn't know your name. Historians still argue whether 18th century gravediggers were paid weekly, monthly, or only per burial. In rural parishes, it was often a handshake deal. Dig the grave, get the coin, no benefits, no promises, no mercy. You stop by the market on your way back. Not to buy, just to look. Cheese, apples, a wheel of salted pork turning slow on a spit. Your stomach growls. You walk on. At the baker's stall, you exchange 2 of your 3 coins for a small loaf. It's still warm. The crust is firm but kind. You hold it like it's a letter from someone who used to write. You keep the last coin. Always one, just in case. Back at the shed, you tear the bread in half and eat slowly over your journal. Today's entry: 3 coins, 1 loaf. The wind colder than the chapel. You don't write more. You don't need to. That afternoon, you're called to assist with a transfer, a body exhumed from the town up the road, buried improperly. Wrong prayers, wrong direction. You don't ask questions. You just bring the tools. The coffin is small, old, the wood flakes under your gloves. As you lift it, something inside shifts. You pause. Listen, not out of fear, out of respect. The priest mumbles something about realignment, about order. You wonder how many graves have been moved, rotated, repurposed, without anyone remembering the names. You lower the coffin into its new place. The priest leaves early. You finish alone. Quirky fact: in many parts of Europe, especially during church expansions, bones were dug up and relocated. Ossuaries, bone houses, wall crypts, all built from the quiet reuse of bodies once believed to rest forever. Some villages called it redreaming the dead. You wash your hands in the stream on the way home. Watch the silt curl away like secrets. The sun sets behind the chapel roof. You sit outside the shed, bread crust in hand, chewing slowly. You think about the coins. You think about the bread. You think about how much lighter things feel when there's no one to share them with, and how heavy they still are anyway. A dog barks far off. Then silence again. Your candle flickers in the shed window. You go inside, close the door, count your breath instead of your coins, and fall asleep, sitting up, boots still on. Because some days never finish. They just fade. Winter doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps. First the grass stiffens. Then the earth resists your spade. Then your breath becomes visible and then expected. Before long, even the dead feel heavier. You wake before the sun, not because you must, but because your body has forgotten how to sleep deeply. You boil water over a fire that smokes more than it warms. Drink it plain. Let the steam sting your face. Your joints are slow to obey. You stretch each one like it's made of rope and wood. Today's task, seal the vault. 3 bodies all buried since the frost began. Temporary placements resting in the family crypt on the west side where the stone door jams if you don't lift it just right. You've patched it 12 times, but stone never forgets its age. You gather your tools, a torch, iron brackets, wood wedges, nails black with time. You pass the church. The priest waves once from far off. He never visits the crypt. Most don't. You descend the stone steps carefully. Moss grows even here, slick and determined. The iron gate resists, then opens with a sigh. Inside, the air is dry and still. The coffins lie like ships at port. You walk among them without noise. You wedge each one snug. Mark the names on a slip of parchment. Seal it in a jar beside the threshold. A record for no one. Quirky fact: some grave diggers in the 18th century created memory jars, clay or glass containers filled with names, dates, and brief notes, buried or hidden within crypts. They weren't official records. They were insurance, in case memory failed and stone crumbled. You light a bundle of herbs, not out of belief, out of habit. The smell is soft, familiar. You close the vault door. It groans. You bolt it shut. Then, out of some instinct you don't examine too closely, you whisper, "Sleep well." Above ground, the snow begins. Not a storm, just a whispering. Flakes gather on your shoulders, your hat, the bridge of your nose. You sit on the chapel steps and watch it fall. Children throw stones at a post down the road. They don't see you, or pretend not to. You're used to both. Historians still argue whether gravediggers in this period were seen as holy or haunted. Some say they were servants of God. Others, servants of decay. You've never claimed either. You just dig and bury and patch and whisper names no one else remembers. By midday, the ground is pale and soft, too shallow for digging now. So, you take inventory. Candles, 7. Rope, frayed. Shovels, 2 good, 1 splintered. Cloak patched again. Food, low. You mark it in your book. Add a small line. Winter arrived quietly. Like most things. You think of the boy again. He hasn't come by in weeks. Maybe his family moved. Maybe someone warned him off. You hope not. You hope he's just waiting for spring. Your fire burns low that night. You wrap yourself in 2 blankets. But still the cold finds you. It always does. You fall asleep with your hand resting on the spade beside your cot. And in your dream, someone asks you for their name. You give it to them, softly, as if it were yours. You lose track of days. Not entirely, not in the dramatic "what month is it" way. More like the way a river forgets its edges. You remember the burials, the repairs, the shift in wind. But the dates, they melt. Until someone reminds you, It's the baker's boy today. Red cheeks, cracked knuckles, breath like mist. He hands you a wrapped loaf and says, "She said it's your name day." You blink. "Is it?" He shrugs. "She says it is." You unwrap the bread twice the usual size with a smear of jam across the top like a sunrise trying its best. You nod your thanks. The boy stands awkwardly a moment longer, then bolts back down the hill. You eat half the loaf right there on the shed step. The jam tastes like strawberries and something sweeter, like being remembered. You flip open your journal. A name day. I am still known. The snow hasn't melted yet, but the sky's a little bluer today, and the ground isn't as stiff. You check the vaults. They hold. You shovel the chapel path, even though no one asked. You set out a bowl of crumbs for the birds. No one watches, but you still do it carefully. Like ceremony. Quirky fact, in certain 18th century parishes, gravediggers were considered on call. During their name days, superstition said it was when spirits most easily remembered who dug their graves. Some men stayed inside all day to avoid crossing paths with fate. You don't stay inside. You walk the perimeter instead. Each grave is a word in a sentence you never stop reading. You check for cracks, sag, animals. There's something comforting in the ritual. You find a mitten near the south gate, child size, damp but intact. You hang it on the fence post in case they come looking. That evening, the priest stops by. Unusual. He doesn't carry a Bible, just a flask. You both sit outside. He drinks. You listen. He talks about the war, distant, abstract, about rising costs, about next spring's taxes. Eventually, he says, "You've been here longer than me." You nod. "I used to think your kind were cursed," he admits. You don't answer. He drinks again. "Now I think you're blessed, in a strange way." You say, "Maybe both." He leaves the flask with you, doesn't say goodbye, just vanishes into the dusk like a man not used to being unsure. You don't drink the rest. You pour a little onto the earth beside the nearest grave, not as offering, not as joke, just because. Later that night you find a ribbon on your door, tied neatly, red, unfaded. You don't know who left it. You don't untie it. You just sit beside it for a while, candle burning low, listening to the wind read names you forgot you wrote down. A storm is coming. You can smell it before it arrives. Wet iron, scorched wood, the breath of something massive, just beyond the hills. The sky shifts shade by shade from pewter to ash to something darker, and every animal in the village seems to pause at once. You brace for it. You've seen these before. Storms that rip shingles from roofs, that flood low graves and carve new channels in the dirt. Storms that unbury what was meant to rest. You start early. First, the oldest markers limestone worn smooth. You hammer in stakes and rope, not for strength, but for memory, so you know what belongs where when the land tries to forget. Then the vault hinges. They groan like wounded animals, but you oil them, wedge bricks against the weakest joints, and pray half-jokingly to no one in particular. And then, the child graves. You always check them last, not because they matter least, because they matter most. You pack sandbags around the smallest stones, tuck bundles of straw into the edges. You hum, though you don't notice it at first, a melody with no name, something soft, like apology. Historians still argue whether graveyards flooded as often as folklore suggests. Parish records mention disturbed burials, but don't always say why. Still, gravediggers kept spare wood planks on hand for coffins that rose like unwanted questions. By midday the wind begins. Not wild yet, just testing. You lock the tool shed, check the stream behind it, already rising. There's a knock at your door. It's the boy. You haven't seen him in weeks. He looks older. Maybe he just looks worried. "I thought you might need help," he says. You blink, then nod. You give him gloves, far too big. He grins. Together you reinforce the east wall, dig a runoff trench by the chapel, drag a plank across the path that always floods first. When the rain comes, it comes sideways. You huddle under the eaves, soaked through watching the cemetery blur into watercolor. Stones disappear and reappear like thoughts. Some of them tilt. A few fall. You make a list in your mind, repairs, names, corners to recheck. The boy doesn't speak. He just watches the rain with the solemnity of someone who's starting to understand weight. Quirky fact: in some traditions, gravediggers carried a storm bell, a hand chime rung when floods threatened to wash through the dead, not to warn the living, but to settle the souls, to let them know they hadn't been forgotten. You don't have a bell, but you do light a lantern. Let it burn by the gate. One small flame against all this noise. Eventually the boy leaves, says thank you, doesn't ask for anything. You watch him walk through puddles, coat flapping. You whisper, "Be heavier than the wind." By nightfall, the worst has passed. The damage will wait for morning. You strip off wet clothes, wrap your hands in dry cloth, eat the last of the bread, damp but edible. And as you fall asleep, the storm still muttering in the eaves, you think that ribbon's still on your door. Morning brings silence, not peace, just the silence that follows something loud, the kind that lets you hear the creak in your joints, the throb in your shoulder, the drip of water from the shed roof, where the beam has cracked again. You pull on boots, still damp from the storm, step out into a cemetery changed. Some stones have toppled. Others lean like tired men after too much ale. Mud puddles mark places where grass used to grow, and footprints, yours, the boy's, others, stitch strange paths through the ruin. You don't panic. You walk it slowly, one row at a time. You write what you can, mark what you can't. Some graves have pooled with water, shallow ones, the newer ones. You kneel beside them, press your hand to the earth, and wait to feel it settle. You whisper to the names. No one taught you to do that. It just started years ago, and now it feels wrong not to. You pass the grave of old Thomas. The wreath someone left is gone, blown clear across the path, tangled in a hedge. You retrieve it, lay it back in place, whisper, still here. You find a rabbit drowned in the runoff trench. You bury it under the elm. Add a pebble. Small, dark, smooth, quirky fact. In some parts of Europe, gravediggers left animal graves unmarked unless found during a flood. Those who did mark them believed the flood had chosen the creature and that it deserved ceremony. By noon, the boy returns, unasked. He carries a new ribbon, blue this time. I thought the red one looked lonely, he says. You let him tie it himself. This time he loops it to the gate. The wind catches it briefly, then lets it go. You give him the small shovel, let him repack one of the graves. You don't speak while he works. When he finishes, he looks up and says, "It's quiet today." You nod. Sometimes it is. He pauses, then, "Do you talk to them? The ones down there?" You say sometimes. He considers this. Then, "Do they answer?" You say, "Not with words." He nods, like that makes sense. Leaves again without goodbye. You stay in the shed until dusk, repairing a handle, re-wrapping the frayed rope, trimming the candle ends. All the small tasks that keep the work moving, even when the earth stands still. Historians still argue whether gravediggers were trusted with ritual beyond their duties. In small villages, they were often priest, clerk, and keeper, all in one silent sentinels of memory. Not always holy, not always welcome, but always necessary. Before bed, you write ribbon blue, graves lean. The storm did not take everything. You lie on your cot blanket up to your chin. Outside, the wind doesn't moan tonight. It sighs, and that somehow feels like progress. The frost has returned. Not a storm this time. Not rain. Just the kind of cold that settles into the stones and makes them ring a little when you walk past. The sky is silver. Your breath trails behind you like a second soul. You're digging today. A woman 82, no children, no husband. Her name was Lizette, and the priest says she always smelled faintly of cinnamon and salt. You never spoke to her, but you saw her sometimes standing just outside the chapel, never going in, watching the graves like someone waiting for her name to appear. It finally has. The earth is hard again, but not unkind. You work slow, steady. Count your shovelfuls, not because you must, but because rhythm makes everything bearable. 3 feet down, you find an old nail, bent, black, hand-forged. You keep it. Add it to your drawer of strange things, broken buttons, a marble, half, a rosary, a coin, with no country left. A life in fragments. You widen the grave, measure twice, line it with straw and stone. Quirky fact, some 18th century grave diggers added layers to the bottom of graves not for belief but for respect. Straw to soften, stones to drain, a pillow of sorts. Not all traditions name kindness. Some just practice it, You pause before finishing. The priest is late. You sit on the shovel's handle and watch the wind carve paths through the frost. Eventually, he arrives. Breathless, apologetic, he fumbles through the rites. You lower Lisette gently. He leaves before you're done. You stay, pack the earth, shape the mound, mark it clean, then sit beside it. Just for a while. You pull out your journal. Write nothing. Some silences deserve to stay that way. And then you rise. You walk the rows. Say each name aloud once. Just once. Even the ones you can't quite pronounce. Even the ones whose stones have worn bare. You whisper them into the wind. Because you are, after all, the last voice they will know. And then just before the sun sets, you kneel in a corner of the yard where no stones stand, and dig, not deep, just enough. A grave the size of you, the ground there is soft. You line it with straw. You place the bent nail at the bottom. You cover it again, not because you are dying, but because one day you will. And it feels better, knowing the earth is ready. You walk slowly back to the shed, the sky now the color of ash pressed against pearl. The frost glints like spun glass across the path. Each footstep a quiet drumbeat of presence. You open the door. The hinges creak their familiar greeting. Inside, the air is warm from the last ember of your fire. It smells faintly of smoke and soil and old wood. You pour a mug of water, sit by the cot. Your bones sigh as they fold beneath you. The blanket scratches, but gently like a memory of comfort rather than the thing itself. You take off your boots, line them near the door side by side. Outside, the frost continues its slow claim of everything, but not unkindly. The candle flickers, low, and in its light, the walls of the shed seem softer, less like walls, more like skin. Breathing with you, you think of Lisette, of the boy, of Marie, of every name you ever whispered beneath your breath. They are still here, not gone, just sleeping, like the land, like the frost, like you will be, very soon. The wind hushes, the silence deepens, and you feel your own breath slow. Your eyes close. The earth holds you, even now, like it always has, like it always will.